All right, to get to the flywheel, what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to remove the shifter, which is an 8mm, and then you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 8mm fasteners here to pull the cover off. Now, when you go to pull the cover off, there's two things. One, the stator is bolted to the inside of the cover and it goes inside the flywheel, okay? The stator is basically a magnet, so you're gonna get some resistance. It's gonna wanna stick on there. The second thing that you're gonna need to remember is you are gonna get some drainage from oil. I went ahead and drained the oil because it's time for an oil change anyways. So hopefully I won't get a lot of drainage when I pull all this apart. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and pull these fasteners off and we're gonna get this stator cover off so we can access the flywheel so we can put our weight on. Now, on most motorcycles, you can have different size bolts, fasteners. These are all the same size, so you really don't have to worry about what order they go. All right? So that's one good thing about this. All right, now you're gonna get a little bit of resistance pulling this cover off because, like I said, this is magnetized. See how it doesn't want to go? Just kind of work it. See, there's your seepage right there. All right, there we go. And I am just going to do this. So remember here, okay, we do have a metal gasket on this one. And I'm just going to stick this up here out of the way. Make sure you take your gasket and set it somewhere to the side where it won't be damaged. All right, next you're going to take a 14mm and remove your flywheel bolt. You're going to have to use a special flywheel puller. I went ahead and got this Tusk. It's an M28x1. There are several different sizes that are used throughout the KTM. Go ahead, put it on, get it snugged up with your finger. Now, I'm going to go ahead and use the foot peg as a resting place. Now listen for this. When you're breaking this free, be wary of the peg. It will hurt if it bites. That pop is just the flywheel being pulled away from the crank. Don't worry about it, everything's okay. Now, when you pull the flywheel off, there's a keyway. I had positioned mine to where it was facing up. Now, you don't want to lose this. When you go to reinstall it, you can put a little grease right here. You can see the keyway right here. The grease will help hold it on like a magnet. Anyway, don't lose that or you'll be in a world of hurt. Also, watch that bearing and these gears. All right, now let's get the fun started. Let's get to the bench. I cannot stress enough clean. This thing has to be clean. I'm talking clean enough to eat off of. If you approach it with that in mind, it'll be plenty clean. All right, next step, we're going to take the emery cloth they included and we're going to try and scuff up this hardened steel that the flywheel is made out of, which to me is pretty much pointless because, like I said, this is an extremely hard surface to try and scuff. I tried a Dremel even with the hardest bit I had and it wouldn't even make a scratch on it. The old air die grinder. Now guys, like I said, this is very hard metal. You really want to get this thing really roughed up right here where I'm showing you with the pick. Getting a good angle on is the hardest part. Do not be afraid to put some pressure on this thing. Don't be in a hurry. Take your time. Make sure you get a good rough surface area that you're going to be putting the epoxy on. You've got to have a good bite so the epoxy will have something to stick to. I know I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but this is what I'm talking about. Kind of clean it off and kind of get a good look at this. See how rough that is? It's got to be rough. From the edge all the way to the lip. You got to have something for that epoxy to bite to, or you're going to run into problems where this thing could break loose and cause you a world of headache. All right, our next step here, we're going to go ahead and we're going to clean all the residue and all the oil off of this thing that we might have missed in the first step. What you're going to do is, I am using 100% pure acetone. It says fingernail polish remover, but as long as it is 100% pure acetone, it doesn't matter. We're going to go ahead and use this metal cup I have here. We're going to pour just enough in it to cover the flywheel so it gets a good soak. Give it a little swish, try and knock some of them particles off. This is going to get it as clean as you possibly can get it. Hit it with our trusty toothbrush to hopefully knock some of that more stubborn stuff off. Guys, again, this is really important because you can't have any kind of a residue or anything, or the epoxy will not bond to it. To the side, let it air dry, and come back and do the epoxy. But before we go ahead and apply the epoxy, we're going to go ahead and clean the rest of the pieces. And we're going to take the flywheel weight and we're going to go ahead and clean it thoroughly while we wait for the flywheel to air dry. Alright, we're going to go ahead and put this to the side, and now we're going to move on to the ring. I'm going to call this a spacer. The directions don't really say anything about this part. I'm going to be OCD. I want everything to be as clean as possible when I assemble this thing. I'm going to give this thing a little look, a little test fit. And it's going to go together pretty good. But remember, when you put this together, do not twist it. Put it straight on, just like this. All right. Now remember, when you clean this, this is one big magnet. So this is going to want to catch anything metal that may be anywhere on your bench, in your workspace, your work area. Make sure it's very clean. That's why they're saying wipe it off with a paper towel and then hit it with acetone again and let it air dry. I went ahead and hit it with the compressed air just to make sure there was nothing there. I don't want to end up with the problem the other guy did when I watched his video, where he claims in less than a year the weight broke away and it ended up being garbage. So I don't want to do that. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to get the epoxy mixed up. We're going to get it applied. So what you're going to do is you're going to mix your epoxy. You're going to put a thin bead layer right around here. You're going to put your clean hoop. So once you get the hoop on here, you're going to apply another layer of epoxy over the hoop, as well as up until the edge right here. You take this to get it on there. Okay, you're going to get some seepage. That's okay. Once you get it set, you'll wipe it off with a paper towel with acetone on it. To clean it up, I am going to use a vise. So you're going to put this around it like this, and I'm just going to stick mine in a vise to hold it for the 24 hours. If you don't have a vise, that is what this is for. Right here. You'll go through like this. Okay, you'll come through the back side. See what I mean? Magnet. And what you'll do is you'll tighten this down, and it'll act like a clamp to hold this to where it dries. Anyways, I'm going to use a vise. One of my buddies that has done this recommended using a vise instead of this, 'cause you'll get better distributed pressure, and you can put a little bit more pressure to it to hold it together. So anyways, I'm going to go ahead and get this re-cleaned up, and we're going to get the epoxy mixed up, and we're going to get it back together. Don't go anywhere. Okay, the directions do not say to do this, but I am going to go ahead and use the sandpaper that came with the kit, and I'm just going to make, just for my own peace of mind, I'm going to go ahead and rough this up a little bit. It's all about prep. So the more prep you do, the better it's going to hold. This will, in my opinion, this will give something a little bit more for the epoxy to bite onto. Plus, it's guaranteed to be clean. And again with the acetone. Okay. Go ahead and let that air dry for a little while. We can get everything set up. We'll come back and we'll assemble it all. Another suggestion I will give you is these gloves are super thin and super cheap. I can see them ripping or getting tears in them real easy. Go ahead, and if you can find them, get some of these real heavy duty latex mechanics gloves. I'm not saying that you have to have them, but it will help. Anyways, let's go ahead and we're going to get everything mixed up. We're going to get the epoxy all mixed up. We're going to start applying stuff. And I've already got the vise set up with an old t-shirt so I don't make any marks or anything like that on the flywheel. So let's get mixed up and let's get to it. Give it a twist. Squirt the entire, oh shit, be careful, it'll go right out. Luckily I made it all in, I think. Use your supplied half of popsicle stick. This is really, really important. This is almost, I want to say this is just as important as cleaning and making sure you've got a good rough surface to bond to. If this is not mixed thoroughly, you are just asking for a world of hurt. Now I'm probably going to make a huge mess, so I'm going to try not to. So first I'm going to do is, once you get it nice and mixed up, go ahead and put a layer. Try to keep it in the groove. Now once you put the spacer ring on the flywheel, you'll go ahead and apply more, and you'll end up getting the rest of the flywheel area where the flywheel weight will bond to. Now, this spacer ring is a split ring. You can actually space it a little bit and it'll slide in and it'll clamp tight around the flywheel weight. Okay, so now you're going to take your quality popsicle stick again. Now it's not set down all the way. I already saw that. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to use plenty of epoxy. The directions don't say how much to use, but I'm going to make sure I get plenty of epoxy on this thing so that there's no possibility that I did not use enough. Like I said, you can wipe off any excess once you get everything put together. With acetone, it comes off pretty easily. Now when you're applying the epoxy, make sure you take it all the way to the upper edge where these little pickups are, because that's going to be the back side of your flywheel weight where it hits the flywheel. Alright, you're almost ready to put it together. Make sure it's evenly covered with the epoxy. You don't have any heavy light spots. You're going to go ahead and set it on a flat surface. Grab your flywheel weight, clean up any excess you might have, and you're going to want to apply even pressure to go straight down to get the flywheel weight on the flywheel. Just like that. Grab your acetone, paper towel, remember why? See all that stuff coming off? Go ahead and wipe that clean. Don't worry about getting it all, but you want as much of that epoxy off of that weight as possible to avoid potential problems. Another very important thing to check for is the back side of the flywheel. You want to make sure the inside where the stator goes in the flywheel, the pickups, is epoxy free. You don't want any debris inside of that thing at all, because that could cause you charging issues probably in the future. So make sure that's just spotless inside of there while you have it apart. One other thing I need to mention, guys, is this hoop that you put in, if it can sit all the way up at this edge, okay? You need to make sure that it is bottomed out. Okay? To where it won't go any further. So can you see that you can see that little tiny bit of, right there, you got a little bit of a gap. You should only see half of the hoop. You should only see half of this hoop that you just put on, okay? And then, let's see here. Make sure you clean it. I should be doing this with gloves. I'm not going to clean too awful much of this epoxy off because I don't want to over clean it. So anyways, you're going to take this, you're going to take your ring, we're going to go over to the vise and we're going to set it in the vise for 24 hours and we'll go from there. So this is what we ended up doing with the vise. Instead of using the bolt and the washer and everything, I'm going to get a lot more pressure to hold this together than I would have using the piece of metal that they provided. Make sure you've got this pretty clean. You don't want to epoxy this ring to your flywheel. We'll let that sit for 24 hours and it'll be good to go. All right, while we wait for this to set up, we're going to go ahead and jump over to the stator cover. There is a small bit of metal that you need to remove so it doesn't hit on the flywheel weight. Anyways, we're going to get over here to the bench and jump on that. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to remove the stator from the cover. This is pretty self-explanatory. Try not to lose anything, and you're going to put this back in the reverse order that you took it apart. Just be careful not to pinch any wires when you're reassembling everything. All right, this next step, this right here, this piece of metal right here, you're going to notch that. And the reason why you do this is to give the flywheel weight the needed clearance so it doesn't rub a piece of metal right here. So the hardest part to do this is getting the right angle. I'm going to go ahead and use a Dremel with a cutoff wheel. You're going to go ahead and just slowly make your cuts. You don't have to be right up against the cover. We're going to come back and clean that up later. Make sure you're wearing safety glasses. As you can tell, this thing really throws a lot of material in the air. Now guys, this is what you're looking for right here. It's not really a notch. You cut this basically in the shape of an L. Now the directions do give you the measurements, but I didn't measure anything out. I just went ahead and cut it. Go ahead now and we're going to use a grinder type bit for the Dremel. I'm going to knock off all the rough edges and I'm going to get a little bit closer to the case. This will reduce the chance of cutting through it on accident. So you're going to do your little fine tuning, fine cutting. You really don't want the flywheel weight to rub on this at all. So make sure you get a good clean cut. I like it smooth. I'm being OCD, but there's no sense in doing it twice. All right, the next step is pretty important. You're going to want to go ahead and clean the stator cover out. This is what I got out. I just used Brake Clean. Carb Clean will work, but Brake Clean, because it evaporates pretty quick. You can see all these chunks and stuff I got out of here. I figured everybody knows how to do that. Just be careful not to spray it in your face. Real important to have this clean. You don't want to contaminate any oil in the bike. So anyways, you should have this thing in the oven or have already cooked it. Next, we're going to go to the reinstall the stator. You're going to do it in the reverse order of the removal. And like I said before, don't pinch any wires. Also, you should have already cooked this thing. It's like 250 degrees for 2 hours. So we're going to go ahead and get it installed. Here's your keyway that you don't want to lose. You're going to go ahead and line the keyway up with this notch in the flywheel. Hopefully you've let it cool down. Sometimes these things can be really, really finicky. It's only going to go on one way, and it may take a little bit of force. You do not want to beat on this thing with a sledgehammer. I am using what they call a sand-filled hammer. And as you can tell, I'm not hitting on it very hard. Just tap it really, really light to make sure it seats up against the bearing. If it's not going on, then pull it off and recheck. Next, you're going to use your trusty blue Loctite. You're going to go ahead and install the bolt. Look up the torque specs because I forgot to include them on the video, which I apologize. And torque it down to the correct foot-pounds. All right, make sure that little gear is pushed up flush or it might fight you getting the cover on. Now, there are two guide pins. One here, and then the other one down here towards the bottom. This is to help hold the gasket on, as well as line up the side case. And go ahead and we're going to check out, see the little notch. You're going to check and make sure everything's flush and everything's mounted in the stator cover correctly. Go ahead and grab your gasket and make sure you have it on the correct way. Line it up and set it up flush against the case. Now remember, when you put the side cover on, the flywheel is going to act kind of like a magnet. It's going to suck it on there. Now this should go on very easily. It should not rock or anything. It should sit very flush against the case. If there's any kind of binding, remove it and make sure that you are not hitting on that flywheel weight. And once all that is taken care of, you're going to go ahead and insert your fasteners. Go ahead and tighten them down. Make sure everything's good and buttoned up. Now, one thing you may want to do before you move any further is go ahead and, while you have the tank off, it will not start, go ahead and try and do a dry fire and listen for any odd sounds that might come from the side case. Again, just double checking that you cut enough material away from that side case to not interfere with the flywheel weight. Alright, hey, while we're finishing up this video, if you haven't had a chance, hey, hit that sub button, give me a thumbs up, let me know that you liked the video, it helped you out, it helps the channel, it keeps it in rotation for YouTube. But anyway, I just want to say thanks for watching, have a great day, and don't forget the last part. Make sure you plug in the stator before you put the tank on, otherwise you're going to be doing this again. Anyways, have a great one. Thanks for watching.